Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kufnun, Hey 155 in Bava Basra. As we come to the final weeks of learning Bava Basra together, we are in the ninth perek. We are going to have Rashbam. Rashbam will have a Tostos too. In fact, we're going to get one of the first things that we're going to do is take a look at a Tostos. So let's dive right in. Let me just remind us what we're talking about. At the end of the day yesterday, we at the end of the day yesterday, we began discussing a case that where we cited a brisa where we had a family complain about the sale of property. So there was a sale of property, and the family comes and says, "Hey, when our cousin, uncle, however you want to call him, sold that property, he sold it when he was still a minor. And so as a result, it's not a valid sale." Now, most likely yesterday when we talked about the fact that he was a minor, we spoke about it as if he was under the age of 13. We will see today that that is not necessarily the case, that we will call somebody a katan even though he is actually older than 13. But we'll see that there's another age, and we'll offer two possibilities of that age right off the bat. When somebody could still be considered a minor with respect to the sale of property. And so as we pick up on the ninth line of Kuf Nun Heyam and Aleph, second word on the line, Itmar, the Gemara raises an issue during which the cited brisa will be used to challenge a position. So let's take a look. Itmar. Katan me'emasai mocher b'nichsei aviv. A minor. Now, again, a young child, but again, this is not, we're going to see in 2 seconds that they were talking about teenagers, or potentially older than a teenager. How, at what age does he have the right to sell the possessions, the estate of his father? Now, Rashbam, not let's take a look at the Rashbam, and we'll then note a Rashbam elsewhere in Tosfos. But Me'emasai, third to last line in the narrow lines. Rashbam is the rabbi who's doing a lot of the commentary on Bava Basra instead of Rashi. Rashi we had on other Masechtot and in the beginning of Bava Basra, but now we've got Rashbam, who is his grandson. We're going to also have Tosfos, so we're going to get to that in a moment. From when can you sell the estate of the father? Bikarka osav. We're talking about his real property, his actual land. V'tahavi mechira, so mechira, such that the sale will be a good sale. De'ilu gabi metalti. But however, when it comes to movable property, Tanan, we have a Mishnah. Hapuutos, young ones, mekhan mekach. Their sales are considered a good sale. And their purchases are good purchases, and their sales are good sales. But metaltalin, and that's talking about movable property. And we explain over there, that even if you're 6 or 7, you're old enough. Each child based on their sharpness. Umishum kidei chayav takinule rabbanan. And why did the rabbis who you would say maybe we should protect young children, but unfortunately in those days it was often the case that you'd have 6 and 7-year-olds who were orphans. Thankfully in our day that's a relatively uncommon thing, but they would have it, and as a result these 6 and 7-year-olds would need to go out and do work in order to make money for the family. And if they can't actually engage in commerce, well, then they would be, exactly, they might starve. So but metaltalin, so the rabbi said that they could do so when it came to movable property. But to have a mechira lemizonasab, because they need to be able to engage in business for their livelihood. for their support of Alba Makarka Elo, but they did not say that when it came to land. So let's take a look now in Tosos. Mocher benichsei aviv, Perish Rabbeinu Shmuel, that's Rashbam. And this explanation, this Rashbam, is actually on Daf Kuf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. It's not right here. It's at the end of the Gemara, end of the discussion of the ability of a youth to sell property. The Davka b'nichsei aviv, that it's only when it comes to an estate of his father that he inherits from his father that we are dealing with a situation where we limit the ability to sell. But if the 17-year-old buys property, well then ushenasno lo b'matana, or it was given to him as a gift. In that situation, well then we're going to say that in fact it is a valid sale. What any transaction he does. Yochel limkor, he'd be able to sell it. But came Perish Rav Alphys, and similarly the Rif, who's a commentary on the Gemara, and takes the Gemara and says, and only includes the aspects of the Gemara that we follow, that he thought we should follow. That because when it comes to things that the person acquired, well, that's fine. If he wants to sell it, that's totally up to him. It's only when he inherits something that we're worried about it. Oh, what about the fact that we say that when it comes to, we're going to see at the end of today that that the youths who are not able to sell property are also unable to testify about property. So perish l'shum karkaos, and it seemed like there it was talking about any kind of property. Kamosha efarish b'samuch dahainu. The aleph is mitam dedaita mikarav legabi zuzed, and we explain that the reason that we don't allow them to testify is because we're worried about their ability to sell, because we're worried about their desire for money. That on some level, and you see this with in modern days, you see this with young children. You could give them 5 pennies for a quarter, right? Because 5 pennies is 5. That sounds like a lot. And a quarter is just 1 coin. Yeah. So you could fool kids in that way. And so the Gemara says that youths love money, love the jingle of change. The Einu Baki B'Shuma, and they're not well adjusted. They don't have the ability to engage in an estimation of the value, in an appraisal. The Rabbeinu Tam payers, but
not much money, 5 pennies.
Yeah, I know it's not much money. Would you make a trade of 5 pennies for a quarter? No, because you're smart enough to know that a quarter is more. A quarter is equal to 25 pennies. Yeah. So the Rabbeinu Tam, however, disagrees. So again, the position of Rashbam and the Rif is that when we say that a youth cannot engage in the sales of transactions, it's only where the property was inherited. It's only where it was real property and when the property was inherited. But Rabbeinu Tam says, Perish Dehuadin, the same law applies, meaning the same law that says that we're not going to allow a youth to sell real property by Nechasim Shekana, by property that he acquires. Because we're still also worried about his ability to sell. I'm sorry, that 1 second. If we're dealing with property that this youth acquired, well, why don't we say that just as he's going to make a mistake and act crazily with respect to the sale, he's going to act crazily with respect to the purchase? So why shouldn't we also either prohibit the purchase, or why shouldn't we say that we should treat the two similarly? Lav Koshihi. The Rabbeinu Tam says that's not really a question, because the issue is not a failure to act with reason. The time of Lomishum shtusu, it's not because the child is mad or crazy. Elamishum de mikruva daite legabi. Rather, he's just so excited about having actual gold pieces in his hand that he's going to undervalue the real estate relative to the gold pieces or the copper pieces or the silver pieces. And so as a result, that's why. And so as a result, only when it comes to sales are we concerned about the ability and the rationality of a youth. And only when, and we're going to see at the end of today's Gemara, that we're only going to say this concern when he engages in a sale. If he actually gives it away, we're going to say that we won't have this concern. So let's now go through. So again, our question is until what age do we limit the ability to sell property? And either we're talking about property that was inherited according to the Rashbam and the Rif, or according to Rabbeinu Tam, we're talking about any property. Until when?
Does a dafka mean sale or purchase? Can he purchase property?
Yes, he can purchase property. And that is, it seems like the Gemara is only, now go on again, it would seem like the Re may be suggesting that in fact he thinks that this is going on both directions, because he sort of sees this as, how could we allow him to buy? Because if we're not allowing him to sell, but the vast majority of Rishonim seem to be understanding this as specifically sell. You would allow him to buy, and again, it's because at the end of the day, we're going to say that young people love cash, and so as a result, they will potentially undervalue things relative to cash. But we're not worried about them overvaluing property and thereby paying too much cash. So it seems like it's one directional. So now let's take a gun. We're going to now take a look.
But how did he get the cash in the first place to purchase the property?
Well, remember, he's a minor. And remember that even a youth as young as, well, we're talking about now a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old, 17-year-old. But to your question, Ken, remember, he's allowed to engage in business with respect to movable property, even as young as 6 or 7. So he may have accumulated a cash position through his sale of, cookies. Maybe he was doing the Girl Scout cookies of the day, whatever they were, etc. So he's made some money. He has the ability to make a purchase, but we won't let him make a sale. Now, we're going to see that that's not a hard and fast rule. If, in fact, a youth has knowledge of business and can engage in a sensible business model, then we're going to allow his transactions to hold. But once you turn 18 years old, according to Rav, and 20 according to Rav Huna, although we haven't yet read that in the Gemara, we're going to say that then we're going to presume that the person is going to be able to do business, and we're going to say that that's a valid transaction. So Rava Amar Rav Nachman, Rava said that Rav Nachman said, Ben Shmona Esrei Shana, he has to be at least 18 years old. Rav Huna bar Chinana Amar Rav Nachman, and Rav Huna bar Chinana said in the name of the same Rav Nachman, Ben Esrim Shana. No, it's 20 years old. Okay, so we're going to skip the parentheses and continue on. Right, because the Rashbam omits this language. Masiv Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera says, ask the following question. How can you, Rav Huna bar Chinana, say that the magic age is 20? What about our brisa that we cited yesterday? And now we're going to cite that brisa that I mentioned at the beginning of today's daf. That is the reason that we're bringing this Gemara here. Ma'aseh b'Bnei Brak. There was a case in Bnei Brak that somebody sold the estate of his father, and then he immediately died. And his family members all came and complained about the validity of the sale. Lomar katan hayashik b'shas misa, because he was saying that the person had been a minor at the time of his death. Uva'u v'shalu as Rabbi Akiva, and they came and they asked Rabbi Akiva, Mahu lebodko, what is the story with respect to checking this guy out? And remember, we saw yesterday two different explanations as to whether or not it was the the family members asking to exhume the body, or the buyer who is asking to exhume the body in order to prove their case. But in any event,
I thought we
either
said
way,
yesterday the buyers didn't really care if they exhumed the body. They said, go ahead. And the family said it was a bizoyan.
no, that was one direction of the read of the Gemara. Remember that yesterday we had a question of explaining Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, that they argued about this meaning, and it was according to Rabbi Yochanan's explanation that we needed to read that into the brisa, that it was the buyers who were trying to sell, and they were like, who cares about any kind of embarrassment? Because again, Amar Lahem, Rabbi Akiva said to them, continuing on in the Gemara, Iatem Rishayim L'Nablo, you're not allowed to defile, you're not allowed to create such an embarrassment to the person to defile that kind of a cadaver. Or their grave. And moreover, any kind of physical signs could change after the death, and so you won't be able to prove your case one way or the other. Now, Bishlam Alamanda Amar Ben Shmona Esrei Shana. Now, according to the one who says that you have to be 18 years old in order to be able to engage in a transaction, well, then it's possible that if you were to exhume the body, even if the child were 18 years old, you'd be able to say that, look, he doesn't have the signs of maturity. And so as a result, that's why he's not going to be responsible. As we say, as we could Bishlam Lamanda Amr Ben Shmona Esrei Lashana, we turn the daf to Kufnun Hey Amabet Hainu to Kaasu Ba'amrule Mahu Levodko. That's why the family comes and asks, let's examine the body, let's exhume the body. Thank you. That was the word I was trying to get. And let's take a look in the Rashbam, top Rashbam on Kufnun Hey Amabet. She'im lo Hainu de Amrule that's why they were asking to check him out. Because if they did not find the pubic hairs that are an indication of majority, yakzikuhu kekatan. Well, then he would be definitively a minor ad esrim until he turns at least 20. And so as a result, when we say 18 years old, we mean 18 years old and signs of an adult. We don't just mean that you have to be 18. So Kiddush Mafarish Va'azal, as we will see going on, as we go further. The Davka V'Le'inyan Limkor B'Nichsei Aviv. But it's only when it comes to the sale of the estate of the father. Tarti Be'ina. Do we need both items? Shmona Esrei Shanim, the fact that he's 18 years old, visarot, and physical signs of maturity, namely having pubic hairs. Aval le'inyan onshin, but when it comes to punishment, umitzvos, and the fulfillment of commandments, what the age of majority, ben yud gimel chashiv gadol im sarot, then 13 years old is considered an adult as long as, again, you have the physical signs of maturity. So again, that makes sense according to the version that you say that he's 18. Ella I Amram ben Esrim. But if you tell me that the age of being able to sell is 20, so as a result, everybody knows, right? The facts, we've modified the facts of our case from yesterday to saying that everybody knows the actual age of the person. The question is, was he actually physically an adult? But and if you say that in fact he was 20 years old, kibadgule my hobby, who cares if they check the person out? And again, we're now Kuvnun Hey Amabet, second line, end of the second line, now beginning of the third line. V'hatanan, because listen to this Mishnah that we're going to derive a lesson. Ben Esrim Shelo Hevi Shtei Sarot, when you have a 20-year-old who does not yet have the pubic hairs, he's not been able to bring the two hairs. So then, Yaviu Rayu Shehu Ben Esrim V'hu Saris. Then you bring a proof that he is 20 years old, and at least at the moment we're going to understand, and we will call him a Saris, essentially a eunuch. He's not going to be able to become a full-fledged adult male, and therefore he's not able to have children. So as a result, lo choletz v'lo miyabim. We're not going to allow such a person to perform either chalitza or yibum, because as Rashbam explains. Well, let's take take a look at Vahu Saris, second of the narrow lines on Kufnin Hay Amabet in the Rashbam. V'harei hu saris. And so, behold, he is considered a saris. V'lo choletz, v'lo miyabim, and we're not going to allow him to do chalitza or yibum. K'da amar b'yavamos, as we learned in b'yavamos, delo karina be lahakim achiv. Shame, because he is not somebody about whom we can say that he will allow his brother's name to be established, because he's not going to have any children. And anybody who's unable to do yibum is unable to do chalitza. Alma biben esrim ve'ela. So what do we see? We see that from 20 years old, even though he didn't have any of the signs of adulthood, namely the pubic hairs, kegadol machzikin le. We treat him like an adult. Ubimne shehu saris lo saros. And because he's a saris, he didn't have the hairs. And so as a result, that shows that if you're 20 years old, it doesn't make a difference whether or not you have pubic hairs. So what in the world would the family members want to try and prove with respect to the exhumation of the body? Because in the end of the day, even if he does not have those hairs, if everybody agrees that he was 20 years old, then it seems like he would be treated as an adult and it would be a valid sale. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara answers, no,
what is the difference between 18 and 20, though? You could say make the same argument here, 18 or 19.
No. If he's 19 and doesn't have those pubic hairs, then he's considered a minor still, according to everybody. Even the people who say that 18 is the age of adulthood for selling property, for selling real property, they would agree that if you haven't brought those hairs yet, if there's no proof of male adulthood by the boy who sold the property, even if he's 18 years old, he's still considered a minor. And so that's why it would be a good proof in that situation to exhume the body and show that there was no hair. Of course, again, excluding the fact that Rabbi Akiva responds back that, well, maybe the body would change with death, and so as a result, it's not a good proof. But theoretically, it would be a good proof, because an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old who has no pubic hairs is still considered a minor and therefore unable to engage in all transactions with respect to real estate. But when it came to a 20-year-old, even if he doesn't have those hairs, it doesn't make a difference because he's 20 years old. At least that's our thinking at the moment.
It just seems arbitrary. They're picking these ages.
Well, no, why not say 21? On some level,
why not say 21 or 22? Why we pick 18 and 20 as these ages?
So two thoughts, right? I mean, on some level, the one who says 20 is also tied to all the concept of that 20 years old is the age of majority with respect to Shemayim, but with respect to the 18-year-old, it is mostly about what is the presumed age of the wisdom in order to avoid making sales that are not appropriate. That's the situation. And again, this is just an indication of wisdom when we don't know for fact that the person is good at engaging business. We're going to see that very shortly. But you're absolutely right that there's no, biblical citation that we are going to offer for this fact. Okay, so lav itmar Allah. So back into the Gemara. So what's the 1, 2, 3, 5 lines down? So lav itmar Allah, Amar Rabbi Yishmuel, Bar Yitzchak, Amarav Bar Rav Yitzchak Amarav, that Shmuel said in the name of Rav, Vahu Shenoldu Bo Simanim Saris, that Mishnah is assuming that the person has the other signs of being a Saris. Simanim Hamifurish, and look, now go back into the Rashbam, 3, 6, 8 lines down in the Rashbam. Behushin noldu bo simanim saris, simanim hamufurashin b'yavamos. These are the signs that we specified in Yavamos, and we had a whole bunch of them. There was a machlokas about a whole bunch of them, but there were a few, like the having no beard hair, or having smooth skin, that everybody agrees are various signs that a saris would have. But so if you don't have those signs, the kevan de ika tarti, because it's only because you have both chashbina like a gadol, then we'll assume that the person is an adult. Aval ben esrim. But if you have somebody who's 20 years old, shalo hevi saros, who has not yet had pubic hairs, the ein bo simnei saris, and he also does not yet have any of the other signs of being a saris, meaning that he does have a beard, meaning that his skin is not smooth because there's no hair on it. Chashvinan like a katan. Well, then we will treat him like a minor. Ad rosh nosav, until he reaches a majority of age, meaning, and we'll see what that means in a moment. We're going to see that according to the Rashbam, it means 36, because the average lifespan is considered 70. As we're about to explain. Now, what happens if he has those signs of being a saris before he turns 20? And yet he still has not yet brought those hairs. We're still not going to treat this child as a saris until he turns 20. Because you need to have both the 20 age and the signs. And so as a result, if in fact everybody agrees that the 20-year-old that passed away after selling the property did not have the signs of being a saris, because he had a beard, etc., and the family says, yes, it might be true that he had that he had no signs of being a saris, but he was in fact still a minor because he lacked any pubic hair. So then it does make a difference, even if the person is 20 years old, right, whether or not he had those hairs. And so it does make sense for the family to ask for him to be exhumed. And Amarava Daikanami. And in fact, we can see, if we take a close look, if we look back at that mission that we just cited, that in fact, the Ketani Vahu Hasaris, that the language of Vahu Hasaris, and that he is a Saris, should not be interpreted as we originally interpreted, right? We said Rayashu ben Esrim Vahu Saris, that there's a proof that he's 20 years old, and therefore he will be considered a Saris. No, the way to read that is Rayashu ben Esrim Vahu Saris, meaning that you need to bring proof both that he's 20 and that he has some symbol of saris. And if you do both of those things, then we'll say lo choletz v'lo miyabim. Then he won't be allowed to engage in. And shma mina. So that in fact is the way to read it. And so as a result, there is no contradiction to Rav Huna bar Chinana with respect to the position that's saying that maybe it's based on the age of 20 that we would treat the person as an adult in order to sell property. V'chilo noldu lo simanim saris ad kama. Well, 1 second. So now we get to the question of, okay, so you're going to tell me that a saris who does not have any of the other signs of being a saris is going to be treated as a minor until when? At some point, we should treat this person as being an adult. And so, I don't know, hopefully, okay. So ad kama, Tani Rabbi Chia, ad rov shnosav, until he has passed the majority of his years. And Rashbam says, were opposite the third to last narrow line in the Gemara at the beginning of the line. Rov Shnosav, Lamed Vav Shanim, 36 years. Shehain Rov Shivim, because 36 is the majority of 70. Kediksiv, Yemei Shnosav Behem Shivim Shana, that when the years of a life, that's 70 years. It's from Tehillim, the chapter Tzaddik, the 90th parak. Okay, so ki asal lekamei de Rabbi Chia, if somebody whose puberty was delayed would come to Rabbi Chia, he would give them advice, and he would say to them, "I kachish." If the person was thin, he would say, Amar lahu libri. Listen, fatten yourself up a little bit, because if you do that, you will, you'll be more likely to have to develop those signs. The ibri, and if the person was a little heavier, well then Amar lahu lichush, so lose a little weight. Dahani simane, because these signs of maturity, zimnin de'asu machmas kechushusa, sometimes you'll help them come as a result of losing weight. Zimnin de'asu machmas beriusa, and sometimes you'll help them come based on adding weight. The point is that you shouldn't, highlighting here, you have to be careful about your weight. This is a Gemara that shows that it's important, especially for young people, to be concerned. No Ozempic back then, so you had to really do the work in order to lose the weight. Okay, Iboilahu. So they asked, Toch Zman, what's the story if it's at the age exactly? Or let's take a look in the Rashbam. Now we're opposite 5 lines down in the wide lines of the Gemara. Opposite that in the Rashbam on the left-hand side of the page, Toksman Shnat Shmona Asrei Gufei Lamar Ushnat Esrim Gufei Lamar Behavi Sarot. So what happens if the person has the physical signs of maturity, they have the pubic hairs, and they are in their 18th year or in their 20th year? Now, for us in the United States, we count years starting with 0 effectively, and we only turn 1 after we finish our first year. So when in our terminology, when somebody turns 17 years and 1 day, they are in their 18th year. Yeah. And similarly, when one turns 19 years and 1 day, they are in their 20th year. So what's the story in that year? Do we treat the person like they were the day before, or do we treat them like what they'll be when they finish the whole year? So that's
the basis for the custom of for those who say Tehillim, they say the Tehillim of the coming year for their age. If they say a Tehillim for themselves, right? So if a person is 25, he says the Tehillim, the daily Tehillim for the 26th Tehillim. There are people that have that custom.
That's exactly right. That same basic principle, because he's in his 26th year. That's exactly right. So kilif nezman o kila achar zman. Do we say it's before the time and therefore he's not able to engage in the transaction, or do we say that it's after the time and therefore he is able to? So Rava Amar of Nachman, toch zman kilif nezman. No, during that year it's like before the year. So you have to turn 18 in a day or 20 in a day. Rava bar Rav Shila Amar Rav Nachman. Again, both of them are saying in the name of Rav Nachman, Toksman Kilacharsman. No, it's like it's after the time. So Vahad de Rava Lav Beferish Itmar Ella Miklala Itmar. And the Rava statement, so the fact that we would say that it's like the current year, that it's like the previous year rather, as opposed to the next year, that is based on the following teaching. Dahu, and it was not said explicitly. Dahu tochzman de'azil zabin nixi, because there was a young person who sold some property, his estate. V'asil kamei de Rava, and he came in front of Rava. Amar lahu lo asav lo klum. He has not done anything, even though he was in his 18th or 20th year, depending on whichever way you would hold. So man dechaza, so the person who saw this savar, he thought mishum de tochzman kilif nezman, that the reason that he was saying that it didn't work in this situation is because it was we are treating somebody who is during the year like before the year, velohi. But that is not necessarily true, because Hasam shtusa yisirta chazabe. Rabba had seen that this person was especially crazy. Dahava kamishachrer lahula abde, because he freed his slave for essentially no reason. And so as a result, Rava could very much agree that somebody becomes able to sell their father's estate upon entering the 18th or 20th year. And so as a result, we have not brought a proof. But what we have done is we've shown that actually even 18 or 20 is not necessarily a definitive line. If a person is actually crazy, we're not going to say that their transactions are valid. So shalach like Gidol bar Menashia l'Rava yilamadenu Rabbeinu, so we had well, one second. If in fact the person was actually full 18 years, full 20 years, so then we wouldn't, even if they were crazy, we would allow their transactions to hold. But if it's during their 18th year or during their 20th year, well, then we'll say that if they're crazy, then we're not going to have their transactions be valid. So Shalach le Gidol bar Menashe.
How is that a proof?
It's not a proof. That's exactly the point. We tried to bring a proof, but
Rava said in that case, this person was crazy. So there's no proof to say that someone who's less than 18 can act as an 18-year-old. Right?
Correct. Exactly. There's no proof. 100%. You're absolutely right. We have not yet proved. Well, remember what we were trying to prove is to show that in fact, if you're in your 18th year, so 17 in a day until 18, that it shows that you're not able to engage in transactions. But it turned out that case involved somebody who is crazy, and so maybe it's only somebody who's crazy who we won't allow. But an ordinary person, once he turns 17 years in a day, we might. But you're absolutely right. We've brought no proof. So Shalach le Gidol bar Menashe le Rava. So Gidol bar Menashe sends the following question to Rava. Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us, our master. Tinokas shpas arba. You have a 14-year-old girl, arba asrei, 14-year-old girl. I'm sorry, Tinokas bas arba asrei shana v'yom echad, a 14-year-old and one-day girl. Yodaz betiv masa umata, and who knows how to engage in business. Mahu, what's the law? So Shalach le, so Rava sent back. Im yodas betiv masa umata, if she knows how to do commercial transactions, so she knows how to do business. Mekacha mekach. Her purchases are purchases, umimkara mimkar, and her sales are sales. Vilishlach le tinok. Well, why did Gidol bar Menashe send this question about a girl? Let him send it about a boy, and that would tell us the answer to our question and give us additional information. No, Ma'aser shehaya kachaya. That he was dealing with a specific case, and this is in fact what happened. Why did he ask about a 14-year-old girl as opposed to a 12-year-old girl? Meaning, let's push the envelope as far as possible. Again, that's how things happen. And so as a result, we now see a couple of different rules. If once you turn 12 for a girl, 13 for a boy, if you know how to do business, it seems like then we're going to say your transactions are a valid transaction. If we know nothing about your ability to do business, then you're going to have to wait until you're 18 or 20, or you're in your 18th or 20th year, potentially. And if you're crazy, well, then you better be 18 full years or 20 full years. Otherwise, we're going to say that your transaction is not valid. So
but how's this a proof? The Gemara brings a case of a girl 14. How do we know it's not 12 or 12 and a half?
Well, the Gemara's implication by asking, why didn't you ask about a 12-year-old girl? Because that would give us additional information. And then we say that Ma'aser shehaya kachaya. So as a result, we're telling us that there was the reason that he didn't ask about a 12-year-old girl because that wasn't the facts. But what we're implying through that statement is that, in fact, the same law would apply to a 12-year-old girl. Again, not you're absolutely
It's
right
an
that that's not
assumption. It's an assumption.
100%. It's definitely an assumption, but that seems to be the assumption that the Gemara is making, and in fact, that is how that's how we paskin. So as a result, that's my proof on some level that that's the correct read. Okay, so we're gonna skip this language. Again, this language seems to have been, based on the prior statement where we said it wasn't explicit. Again, this is the what follows isn't in fact a proof. So we're going to skip this language. So again, hahu pachos miben esrim. So now we have a case where somebody who's under 20, de'azul zabin nechse avuhe kegidol bar menashe. And clearly, we're going to follow the approach of Rav Huna Bar Chinana that is following the age of 20 as being the main age. So what happened? I'm sorry, let me now rotate, so because we have covered this. So we have this 20-year-old, and De'azol, who's not quite 20, meaning he's under his 20th year. De'azol zabin nichse avuhu kegidol bar menashe, and he went and sold his property like the ruling that we had with respect to Gidol Bar Menashe. Remember, that ruling is that if you know how to do business, we're going to allow you to do business. And so presumably this young man, knew how to do business. Let's take a look at the Rashbam, fourth line down, where he quotes this language that we are going to exclude. V'hadu rava lav beferish chulu lo garsinan haka klal. This language that we have in parentheses, we should not have that at all. V'haki garsinan. This should be our language, and this is exactly how we read it. Hahu pachos mi ben esrim shemachar. Well, now it's a little bit different, but he continues. Shemachar benichse aviv kegidol bar menashe, who went and sold the estate of his father using the principle of Gidol bar menashe, because remember, the Rashbam believes that only when you're selling the estate do these limitations kick in. If you're selling real property that the 13-year-old bought himself or that he received as a gift, he would be able to engage it. So that's why the Rashbam makes that qualification. And he had the chazaka of knowing how to do business. So the Azal Zabin Nichse Avu Kegidol Bar Menashe. So back into the Gemara. So what happens after that? So now people get upset. So we're right after the brackets in the middle of the 7th wide line of the Gemara. Also the Kamei de Rava. So now the case came in front of Rava because his family wanted to renege on the deal. So in fact, take a look in the Rashbam, back in the Rashbam, 5th line down in the Rashbam, middle of the line. Also Kamei de Rava, Kadei Laxerbo, because they wanted to undo the deal. The Lomer She'ena Yodea Betiv Maso Mata. And this young man does not know how to engage in business. So I'm relating.
So wait, well, what is the case? Is he 20 years old?
He's under 20,
under 20, and he inherited the property.
And now he went and sold it. And we thought, and the purchaser certainly thought, he was a smart business person, and therefore the transaction was a valid transaction. But now his family.
So who are the other people in the family then? Were they also inheritors?
They could be in potential heirs of this young man. So maybe this young man is now, well, no, the young man is going to still be around. So we're going to see that these are Amrule Krove, his relatives say to this young man. So these are people that would inherit if he were to pass away. Zil echol tamre ushteba kashyasa beirava. Go eat some dates and throw the pits in Rava's house. meaning that will show, take a look at the Rashbam, 6 lines down. So again, the case is somebody under 20 inherited property, sold the property with the understanding that he was a good business person, and now his family wants to undo the deal, and maybe he wants to undo the deal as well. So he's now given advice to go and eat some dates. And as Zil Achol Tomre, and in the Rashbam, 6 line down, the Hishlak of the wide lines, the Hishlak Garinim Lifnei Rava, and go throw those pits in front of Rava. V'yeyeh savor she'ata shoteh, and he'll think that you're mad. Shv'yachzir loch nechasech, and then he'll return the property to you, because if you're mad and you're under the age, it's not a valid transaction. So Avad Hachi, he did that. So Amar Lahu, so the Rava said to the purchasers, Zvini la Zvini, the purchase isn't a good sale. Kika kasvule shtara. So when now the decision was about to be written, Amrule lakukos, the purchasers tell this young, impressionable young man, Zil Amale Larava, go tell Rava that because the purchaser was going, the family who won the case was going to have to pay the scribes for the written document that would allow them to get back the property. So the purchasers surreptitiously tell the young man that Megillus Esther Bezuza, Shtara Demar Bezuza. So the price that you would pay to buy Megillus Esther, which is of course a longer scroll, it cost a zuz. And now you're going to tell me that this document that I'm going to pay for the writing is going to cost me a zuz? That makes no sense. So, and as a result, so now Azal Amrlay, so the seller goes and in fact tells this to Rava, so indicating that he actually knows how to negotiate. So Amar Lahu, so now that he said that, the Rava undoes his original ruling and zvine, and says that his sale is in fact a good sale. Amrule Krove, so the relatives go back and say to Rava, hey, Lakuchas Agmaruhu, the purchasers taught him to say this. He didn't really know what he was doing. So as Rashbam says, Lakuchos Agmaruhu, Lomar King. He was taught to say this. Lahai. Ach Eno Yodea Klum. He really knows nothing. So Amar Lahu, Rava said back to them, Maspere le Savar. So 1 second, look, the purchasers told him a claim, but he understood it. And Keva de Maspere le Visavar, since he was able to understand it, Meida Yada, it's clear he does know how to bargain. V'hai de Avad Haki Chutzpah Yisera Hu de Havavei. And now I understand that in fact, the fact that he threw the pits in front of me wasn't because he was crazy. He was just acting with a lot of chutzpah and trying to pretend to be crazy. As we say in the Rashbam, Amar Lahu Kevan de Mispre Le, Davar Chachma, that since they explained to him some aspect of wisdom, we're in the 1, 2, 4, 8, 9th line of the wide lines of the Rashbam, and since we were able to explain some wisdom, V'yodea lahavin, and he was able to understand it, Chachamhu, he's a wise young man. Umemkaro mamkar, and so as a result, his sale is a good sale. V'hai deshada kashyasa, and that which he sent those pits in front of me, chutzpah ba'almahu. It's just a obnoxious streak that he has, da'avad, that he did that. V'lo mitoch shtus, and it's not because, in fact, he's crazy. So that's the end of that case. And again, it confirms everything that we've understood so far. Namely, if in fact you're a minor, if in fact you've reached the age of 12 or 13 and you engage in business and you know how to engage in business, you're absolutely fine. Your transactions are going to be valid. If you don't know how to engage in business, your transactions are not going to be fine until you're 18 or 20. And in one way to prove that you're not capable of negotiating in business is if in fact you act in a crazy manner. If you act in a crazy manner and show a lack of responsibility with respect to finances, well, then you are considered still a minor and unable to engage in transactions.
On what basis did Rava have? What right did he have to tell this fellow to act is crazy in his mind by throwing the dates. It seems he was taking the side of
No,
the
no, it
Krovim, of
wasn't
the
Rava who
Krovim.
said that. It was his relatives. The relatives told the young man to act crazy, to throw the pits. It
So
wasn't
that
Rava.
it looked like it was
Rava,
rubber.
No, no, no. It says Amrule Krove. His
Oh,
relatives said to him, Zil echol tamre, go eat a date, ushte be kashyasa be Rava, and go throw those pits in Rava's house. It was the relatives who said this, not Rava. Rava saw it, observed it,
oh,
and thought that initially that it was an indication of the young man's craziness, and therefore it wasn't a valid transaction. And
oh,
then in
oh,
the end,
okay.
he determined
Okay,
that it
really.
wasn't actually craziness; it was just the chutzpah, it was the rudeness of the young man, and that was why he did it, because in fact he was trying to act crazy and not actually he was not actually crazy. Okay, so Amar Rav Huna, Bray to Rav Yoshua. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav Yoshua, we are the Amar Rav is 1, 2, 3, 7 lines up, last two words on the line. Again, Amar Rav Huna, Bray to Rav Yoshua, Ula Edus. When it comes to testimony, and now we're going to have two other areas where whether one has a business sense may not matter. Ula Edus. When it comes to testimony, Eduso Edus. The testimony of an adult orphan is good testimony. It doesn't make a difference. Take a look at the Rashbam. Amar Rav Huna Ula Edus Meid. Then when it comes to his testimony, Af al Pisha Amarnu Bipachot Mikaf. Then when it comes to somebody who's under 20, She'ena Yodea Bitiv Maso Matan, who doesn't know how to engage in business, Eino Mocher B'Nichsei Aviv, he doesn't have the ability to engage in transactions with the respect to the estate of his father. Aval le'edus, when it comes to testimony, neman hu leha'id mashara the shama. But he's going to be believed to say what he testifies about with respect to what he sees and what he hears. Mi ben yud gimel ve'elach, once he turns 13. Shehevi shtei saros, and he has the signs of maturity, to the pubic hairs. Hoel ve'eno shota, as long as he's not crazy, as long as he's not mad. So Amar Marzutra, lo Amran Ela Metaltli. No, when we say that his testimony is valid, that is only with respect to movable property. Aval b'makarke, lo, but not with respect to land. So Amarle Rav Ashi Lamar Zutra, Maishna Metaltli. Why would you allow the under 18-year-old or under 20-year-old to testify about movables but not land? Presumably it's because Dizvini Zvine. It's because his sales of movables are a valid sale. But Elamiata, if you say that we should believe anybody whose transactions are a valid transaction, Haditanan, what about the fact that we learned in a Mishnah? There's a Mishnah in Gittin, Daf Nun Tet Amud Aleph, Hapautos, when it comes to young ones, Mekachan Mekach, their sales are their purchases are good purchases, Umem Karan Memkar, B'metaltlin, and their sales are good sales, all when it comes to movable property. So if in fact young children as young as 6 or 7 can engage in sales, why don't we allow them to testify, just as you are saying with respect to somebody who's under the age of 18 with respect to movable property, that you're limiting that testimony to movable property. So Hakanami de dusan edus. Are you going to tell me that their testimony is also good? Meaning it can't be that we're tying the ability to transact to the ability to testify. So Amarle Marzutra explained, no, listen, Ravashi. Hasam be'ina v'amdu shneha anashim v'leika. When it comes to testimony, we have a pasuk. The pasuk is in Dvarim Perak Yud Tat pasuk Yud Zayin, where it says, "And the two anashim are going to stand and give testimony." And so, as a result, you need anashim, men, adults. They cannot testify if they're not adults. So that was point number one. So again, point number one is you can testify about movable property, but in order to testify about real property, you also have to wait until you're 18 or 20. Amar Meimar umatana so matana. But when it comes to a gift is a valid gift. And Rashbam explains, third line up from the bottom of the Rashbam, Amar Ameimar Matana, so in the middle of the line, Shall Ben Yud Gimel B'Yom Echad, that a gift of a 13-year-old in one day, Havya Matana, it's a valid gift. Even though he doesn't know how to engage in business. The ain mechiras karka oseh mechira, and their sale, even though the sale of that real estate would not be a valid sale. If he gave away the estate as a gift, it would be a good gift. So Amarle Rav Ashi Lameimar, Rav Ashi is shocked by this. Hashta umazvini de mekabel zuze amra delo dilma mozin mizabin. That when it comes to a sale where the person actually received money, we say that maybe he will have given too low a price when he sold it. Kol shagain matana delo matile velo midi. Where certainly when it comes to a gift where he got nothing at all, we're going to be worried. Shouldn't we be worried that he gave it away for nothing and it was not a good gift? So Amar Lay, as we turn to Kuf Nun Vav
But isn't that a point of a gift? You give it away?
Yes, yeah, well, that's what part. But we usually say that the recipient of the gift has, there's either a debt that's owed, or it's a response to somebody being nice. But we're going to see that in fact, the logic it makes a lot of sense, right? If we're worried that a person's going to, you're exactly right that a gift is something that you get for free. But the point is that from the giver's perspective, if we're worried about him not getting enough money, shouldn't we especially be worried when he gets no money? So utamech zabin shavi chamsha b'shita. But 1 second, Amemar responds that according to your logic, if the orphan sold land that's worth 5 for 6, would you hakinami to zivne zvine? Would you say it's a valid sale? Of course not. No, it's not a valid sale. And the reason is not about the inability or the fact that the child is going to necessarily be cheated. Elakim lahud l'rabbanim. Rather, the rabbis understood. This is what we began with, and now we're going to end with it. That when it comes to a young person, they love zuzim, they love coins. And if we were to say that the sale's a good sale, sometimes the purchaser will jingle a bag of coins, and the youth will say, "I don't care how many is in there. I want that bag of coins." And he's going to end up selling all the property of his father. But when it comes to a gift, if the orphan did not get something from the person to whom he's giving the gift, he wouldn't just give him a gift. He must have gotten some benefit. So as a result, the rabbi said we're going to let him give a gift. Because we want people to do things for him. If we take a look at the Rashbam, the Avdan Mili, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down in the narrow lines of the Rashbam.
Noticing he wants people to do things for him.
Well, that's exactly why we're going into the Rashbam right now. Ligmolo chesed. We want the people to do chesed for this ulahetiv lo, and to do good things for this orphan. This is an orphan that we're talking about, b'chol inyanin, when it comes to all kinds of things. So the point is that we want the orphan to be able to say thank you by returning his appreciation by giving a gift. And so as a result, we will make his gifts valid because we want people to take care of the orphans. And so as a result, gifts will be valid, but when it comes to a sale will not be valid.
So why is there no consider? I mean, you could think that maybe one is inducing the orphan to give a gift. Okay, you'll do something for him, but the orphan gives away a house, and you give him back
100%.
give him back trinkets, giving him trinkets that he likes. that is that really a fair deal? I mean, if you're inducing him
Uh,
to give away his father's car, I mean,
A hundred percent, a
where does
hundred
it
percent.
end? Where does it end?
Well, I think the good news is that it ends because if in fact he acts in a manner that we would all consider crazy, we have that as a fallback when we're talking about somebody who is a minor but not the age of 18 or
Wouldn't
20.
have to be crazy. He just could be ignorant. He just doesn't know. He's 6 years
Uh-huh.
old. What does he know?
Well, an ignorance of a certain level will be understood to be on some level a mad action, and so that's why again the person who was 17 and a day or 20 or 19 and a day, we saw if in fact he gave away his slave for he freed his slave for no reason, we're going to say that that person does not know how to engage in business and acts in a foolish manner, and therefore we're going to say that their transactions are not valid. So we have that level of protection. But for the ordinary person, we're going to say that his gift's a good gift. So the Gemara next is going to turn to summarize the situations when we need to confirm that someone has reached the age of majority. But for that discussion, stay tuned for tomorrow's
But on
topic.
the other hand, I don't know that a gift requires any reciprocal response. A person gives a gift out of his own free heart. He's giving a bottle of wine to someone for a holiday, so forth.
A
Let's say.
100%. But usually there's some relationship that exists, and that's what the Gemara is basing it on. Meaning, again, we want people to take care of their neighbors and their friends, etc., especially those who are orphans. And so as a result, because of that, we're going to allow those orphans to say thank you in a material way. Again, is it perfect? No. But that is how the Gemara concludes, differentiating between a sale, which is supposed to be an arm's length transaction, and a gift, which, as you noted, by its very nature, is not arm's length. And so, as a result, we're going to allow the youth to give a gift, even if we don't allow him to engage in a sale. All right. Looking forward. We'll pick up, God willing, tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing it's Zoom only and it's 7:30. Zoom only and 7:30. So please keep that in mind. We're going to start a little early because davening here is at 8:30. So we'll start at 7:30 and we will be done by 8:15. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.